Hey, so I want to first introduce a notation that we will need pretty soon, which is the notation for substitution. And it works like this. So if you have any proposition, so let me put my placeholder for propositions, phi, and you want to replace a certain variable in that proposition, like x, by some other term, then you can write this. Phi subscript with the brackets, x arrow, and then the other term would go here. So any term can go here. Now that I'm talking about propositions and terms and variables, maybe it's worth reviewing for a second what those things mean. So here I am at the very beginning of our lecture notes, where you can see that we have 4 parts of speech. Mainly 2 parts of speech, propositions and terms. And then among the terms we have constants, variables, and then more complicated terms also. So far we've mainly just been working with propositions. And actually not even that. We've mainly been working with placeholders for propositions. So just like blanks that say a proposition will go here later. Now we're going to introduce a role for variables when we introduce quantifiers. And the purpose of a variable, so if you go back and look at the main sort of role that variables play, is that they themselves act like placeholders, waiting to be replaced. So if a variable is going to be replaced, then in order to describe the rules for when it should be replaced and by what it should be replaced, it would help to have some notation that just says, replace this variable by that symbol. So this is that notation. So you can think of this, whenever you write this, you can think of it not necessarily as a proposition, but as something that will become a proposition once you carry out the instructions to do this replacement. To start with, it's not anything, it's just instructions to do something to some symbols. So you can interpret this as being basically the instruction, replace all occurrences of the symbol x by whatever term is here. So let me just give you an example. Here's an example of a term, 1 plus y by 1 plus y. And you can add parentheses around it if it's needed to maintain sort of precise grouping, so there's no ambiguity with how things are grouped. So let me give you an example. So here is a proposition, x plus 3 equals 2. This is a proposition because it's trying to say something, and we haven't yet gotten into what it's trying to say. We have not defined equals, that will happen later, and we have not defined plus, that will happen much later. But it doesn't matter. We know it's a proposition. And now when I do this, I say take this proposition and replace x by 1 plus y, then the result of carrying out this instruction, the result of doing it, will be this proposition. And notice the parentheses had to be introduced in order to keep the grouping clear. So to be perfectly clear about the parts of speech involved here, what goes here has to be a proposition. And what goes here has to be a variable. So this is very strict. And what goes here can be a term. This is less strict. But what goes here has to be a variable. So that means it doesn't make any sense to put, say, 3 here, because that's not a variable. Here, it's okay to put 3, it's okay to put y, or more complicated propositions. Later, we might need to, actually, in just one instance, we will need a version of this where a term can go here. And we don't really have any symbols for term placeholders. We've been using capital Greek letters for proposition placeholders, but we don't have any symbols for term placeholders. So at that time when we need that, I'll introduce a symbol just for that one moment, and it'll be a smiley face. So you'll see that when it comes up. Okay, and one other comment about this, well, a couple of other comments about this notation. One is that this is not a standard notation, so if you ask for help outside of me and Michael for this course, people might not know what you mean by the notation, so you'd have to explain it to them. And there are a few times that this happens in our Math 8 course. There are things that there's just not necessarily one agreed upon notation for, so I just had to make one up or borrow it from some obscure place just for the sake of our course. And when that happens, I will tell you, like, this notation is just for our course. So don't necessarily take it too seriously outside of our course. This is one of those situations. So this notation is not a standard thing. It's not really a huge deal since this notation is going to be used sort of temporarily to help us explain how different logical rules work. But once it's done its job, we can throw it away. Then we don't have any need for this notation anymore. So once you sort of graduate from this Math 8 class, you will know things that you can use that don't necessarily need notations like this. So these are sort of temporary helpers along the way of developing the language. Okay, and there's a second point, which is I want to show you how to typeset this in LaTeX. Okay, let's say you want to make a capital Phi. I can do it like that, right? Just \capital Phi. And now I Control S to save, and there it is. Now if I want a subscript, which is not exactly, I don't just want a subscript, but let's just start with a subscript. Let's say I want capital Phi subscript n. Then I can do that. So the underscore here means I'm making a subscript. Now what if I want the subscript to look more complicated? Like, let's say I want it to look like nn, as though it's an object with multiple indices or something like that. This doesn't work. See, I can't just do nm next to each other and then expect both to be subscripted. LaTeX will only subscript the next item it sees after the underscore. So if you want to subscript something more complicated, then you have to group items. And the way to do that is using curly braces. So curly braces are the way that LaTeX will group items. So now you see I've got the subscript I wanted. Now let me show you how to do the thing we need. So I need square brackets like that, and then x, or whatever variable is going to get replaced. And then you can do \2, or \right arrow for the right arrow, and then whatever it is that you're going to replace it with, like 1 plus y. And you see that's sort of the notation we want.